Today we gather not to celebrate, but to mourn. To mourn the tragedy that is Nsfas, the single most embarrassing funding scheme South Africa has ever seen. Imagine you're a broke, hard-working student in South Africa, trying to better your life. You hustle, you get into university, the promised land of opportunity. Enter Nsfas, the government's knight in shining armor, or so they claim. More like a clown car that shows up to a burning building and tries to put it out with a single glass of water. Nsfas is supposed to fund your education, but instead, it becomes your life's biggest unpaid internship. They promise the world tuition, books, housing, but deliver something that barely qualifies as breadcrumbs. And when they finally pay up, you're either deep in debt or paying out of your pocket because of their incompetence. And let's not beat around the bush here. Nsfas, which supposedly stands for the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, is more like the national scheme for financially abandoning students. It's an institution so laughable, so tragically inefficient, that it makes Eskom look like a top-tier company. If Nsfas were a Netflix special, it would fall under the dark humor genre. Warning, this show contains sensitive scenes including torturing minors, starving children, and downright cruelty. Not for the faint-hearted, ladies and gentlemen. How on earth do you run a funding scheme where students get their allowances later than Eskom schedules load shedding? Payments are delayed so often, it feels like Nsfas is running a national Hunger Games experiment. Students literally sit in their dorms debating whether to eat the toothpaste left or ration the last of baked beans. And don't even get me started on the 45,000 Rand accommodation crap. Nowadays, where does 45,000 Rand get you in South Africa? I know, a small room, probably with cockroaches that demand rent from you. They'll leave you living in areas where crime statistics are so high they look like horror movie reviews. A 10 out of 10 chance of getting mugged. Let's not forget the promise Nsfas makes. We'll help you to get an education. It's beautiful, isn't it? Almost poetic like Shakespeare. Except much like an ANC election campaign promise, it's a downright lie. Nsfas promises the world, but delivers disappointment. They're like that one friend who always promises to help you move, but then suddenly gets sick on moving day. If you ever applied for Nsfas like me, you know it's less of an application process and more of a survival test. I'm talking World War Z here. First, you have to fight through their website, which crashes more than a drunk driver in Sandton. And then you must submit a mountain of paperwork only for them to lose it. And let's not forget their favorite excuse. Your documents are missing. Missing where? How? Did someone wipe their ass when you guys ran out of tissue there? Did someone eat them for lunch? Applying for Nsfas feels like going to a pit toilet in the public schools in the rural areas. You either fall into the shit and piss and die in misery, or you somehow survive and crawl out there and get back to class, which is outside, by the way. And let's not forget the infamous payments, the Nsfas payments. Payments more infamous than Thabo Bester. Let me paint you a picture to put you on game real quick. It's the middle of the semester, you're starving, you've been surviving on instant noodles for weeks, but even those have run out now. Your landlord is breathing down your neck. Your textbooks are nowhere to be found. And Nsfas, silent. Dead silent. Nsfas payments arrive so late that by the time you get them, you've already graduated, or maybe even dropped out. It's like inviting someone to dinner at 7 p.m. and then they show up the following morning with some cold McDonald's. Let me throw some hard facts into the mix here. According to reports, Nsfas managed to accidentally overpay 5,000 students in 2022, while others didn't receive a cent. Imagine being so bad at your job that you mess up by giving money to people who don't need it, while leaving the actual students who need it stranded. It's like a waiter spilling soup on you and then they charge you for extra service. Oh, let's not forget about their 10% budget cut for 2024. That means fewer students are going to be funded, while executives still get their fat bonuses like the demons they are. The Nsfas direct payment system was supposed to fix things, but it's even slower than the How train during a power failure. Students have to go through third-party providers who take so long to pay out, you'd think they were mining Bitcoin instead of transferring allowances. Nsfas is like that clingy ex who promises they've changed, but the moment you give them another chance, they just ghost you. Or even worse, they send you a sorry not sorry message when they fail to deliver. If South Africa's economy were a person, Nsfas would be its slow-witted sibling, fumbling through life and relying on excuses like that deadbeat uncle to survive. Nsfas is like Charlotte Maxeke Hospital or even Helen Joseph. You show up waiting for a solution, but all you get is frustration, delays, and a growing sense that nobody actually cares. And believe me when I say that. Have you ever tried calling Nsfas? It's a masterclass in futility. Their call center agents are either non-existent or they sound like they're being held hostage or something. And when you do get through, when you finally get through, they'll put you on hold for so long, you start questioning your life choices. Nsfas is the only place where you can send 17 emails, 5 WhatsApp messages, even a damn carrier pigeon and still get no response. It's almost impressive, really. Nsfas isn't just a funding body, it's a social experiment in how much desperation students can endure before they burn the nearest building. Every time allowances are delayed, campuses erupt in protests, students shut down lectures, block roads, and sometimes torch facilities. Nsfas doesn't just fund education, it funds the flames of chaos. If rioting were an Olympic sport, South Africa would be gold medalists year after year thanks to Nsfas. And let's talk about the audacity. When students protest, Nsfas officials go on radio or television wearing their smug smiles like the demons in suits they really are and call it system errors. System errors. That's like a chef blaming the oven for burning food. Correct me if I'm wrong here, okay? It's your job to manage the system. If you can't, maybe leave it to funding people who don't fail at the basic level of incompetence. Maybe leave it to people who won't react like Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants. You know, when dollar signs show on his eyes when he sees money. I'm sure you all know by now exactly where the money goes. I might as well give you a little hint here while you're at it. It's not to the students. Nsfas is like a sieve. Money flows in, but it never reaches where it's supposed to go. Instead, it disappears into the pockets of bureaucrats, consultants, and IT upgrades that never seem to work. In 2022, Nsfas lost millions of rand to fraudulent claims and errors. Errors that strange. If I somehow stole millions from YouTube, I'd end up in jail. Not in a boardroom like you demons. I think we can all agree that Nsfas is to education what Eskom is to electricity. They are both unreliable, inefficient, and cost the country more than they're actually worth. At this point, we should just merge the two and call it Nsfascom or something. At least then, we'd only have one national disgrace to deal with. And can we talk about the irony for a second? South Africa is the only country where students protest for free education, get Nsfas, and then protest again because Nsfas doesn't pay. It's like winning a free car only to realize it doesn't have an engine. Imagine being a Nsfas student. Being a Nsfas student is like being on a forced diet. You don't eat because you're broke. You're broke because Nsfas hasn't paid you. And when they finally do pay you, it's so little you're back into Maggie's instant noodles again in no time. It's the circle of poverty, not the circle of life. Let's not sugarcoat this, alright? South African students are suffering. They are suffering. Universities aren't just places of learning. They're more like survival camps. Students trade meal vouchers like prison currency and attend lectures on empty stomachs. Nsfas has turned education into a form of endurance training for some reason, where only the strongest can make it out. Remember the recent Emalahleni shootout, the one I spoke of yesterday? Crime is so normalized in South Africa, students joke about joining ATM bombing crews like that case of yesterday just to fund their studies. And why wouldn't they? Crime seems to pay faster than Nsfas. Even the Bible warns us against incompetence and irresponsibility like Nsfas. In Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the talents teaches us to be good stewards of what we've been entrusted with. Nsfas, however, is like the lazy servant who buries the money and then complains when the master demands accountability. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 7 says the borrower is a slave to the lender. Nsfas is this modern day pharaoh enslaving students with their incompetence. And as an electrical engineering student myself, I say this on behalf of every other student in South Africa who uses Nsfas. Just like Moses parted the Red Sea, we need someone to part Nsfas from our lives because they're like the pimple on our backs we just can't reach. Speaking of biblical values, let's call out more devils in these roots of corruption, shall we? Nsfas executives have been linked to some of the most shadiest deals with payment providers. You probably don't know this, but Nsfas has a new CEO now. You want to know why? Because their former CEO, Andile Nongogo, was suspended for awarding contracts to companies he allegedly had personal ties with. That's like a school teacher giving a certain student more marks because he cheated on his wife with the student's mom and doesn't want anyone to know. It's just downright evil. It's downright cruel and downright awful. That automatically tells you by instinct that these people are not here to ensure fairness. They're here to profit from all this chaos. So let's get real. Nsfas doesn't need restructuring. It needs an exorcism. Just like how some believe there's good and evil, Nsfas has actually managed to create unity in South Africa. For once, black, white, colored, Indian, students of every race who use this bursary all agree on one thing. Nsfas is terrible. It's the one thing that brings us together like a dysfunctional family at Christmas. And speaking of Christmas, Nsfas payments are like Santa Claus. You hope they'll show up, but deep down, you know it's just a myth. But despite all its problems, Nsfas is a symptom of a much larger disease, South Africa's culture of mismanagement. From Eskom to the SABC, the entire country runs on this model of mediocrity. Nsfas is just another cog in this massive broken machine. It promises hope but delivers despair, creating a cycle of poverty that no amount of student protests can fix. South Africa doesn't need Nsfas. It needs accountability. It needs innovation. It needs new board members. And most importantly, it needs to stop treating education like an afterthought. Let's zoom out for a moment. Nsfas isn't just bad because it's inefficient. It's bad because it represents everything wrong with this country. Corruption, mismanagement, and a complete lack of accountability. Nsfas is an offspring of our corrupt government. They promise the world, just like certain individuals you and I know, on the high positions. Then they deliver nothing, and then just like them too, act surprised when the people are hungry. And angry too. It's like the same playbook, just on a different stage. To every student dealing with Nsfas, you're not alone. Trust me, I feel your pain. As an electrical engineering student myself who also relies on Nsfas, I know what it's like to feel like walking straight to a Nsfas employee the next time you see them, opening their mouths wide open and blowing a hot fart down their throats. I have a friend who lives in a dorm where she argues with her roommates on who ate the last portion of pap because they just have nothing else to safely consume in the place except water. Don't even get me started on the stories my female classmates would share with me on just what they had to do to not get kicked out by the landlord. Trust me, it's not good information to know. Actually, even mentioning that makes me want to wash my tongue with soap because I've been trying my best to forget some of those stories. So what's the solution? It's simple. Burn Nsfas to the ground, metaphorically of course, and start all over. Create a system that actually works, one that prioritizes students over bureaucrats, efficiency over excuses, and results over rhetoric. Until then, Nsfas will remain what we've always known it to be. Nsfas will remain what we've always known it to be. A national joke, a tragic comedy that nobody finds funny anymore because they're too hungry to laugh. So it's time to stop laughing and start demanding better, because South Africa's students deserve more than this giant circus. And if any Nsfas executive may be watching this, hey, I'm Summer Sambit. You're not watching this by accident. If you're watching this, it means this video went so viral, you are going to watch it or hear about it at some point. So if you are watching this, maybe consider doing your job for once. Or better yet, resign and let someone else competent take over. Because right now, Nsfas isn't funding the future of South Africa. You and I know it's funding its downfall. And if you can't do that for whatever reason, maybe consider switching careers. I hear clowns are in demand at children's birthday parties. I also heard OnlyFans is now in the trend. So you can start that too to make an extra buck on the side. So long, you demons. And this is for the government officials. Stop treating students like statistics for once and start treating them like people and the future leaders they are. Otherwise, South Africa will remain what it's become. A punchline in its own tragic comedy. Nsfas, crushing dreams since day one.